back Year 12. This is our final slog of Year 12. 5 weeks, summer, back as Year 13s. So we're on our research methods, our Year 13 element of the research methods. Now, I obviously don't have access to give you a pink-haired girl textbook for Year 2. Can't go into my room, potentially, maybe not even in September, hopefully in September. So what I'm going to do for this section is I'm going to upload and scan in the Year 13 textbook. Obviously, if you want to buy it yourself, I'm not going to be against that. I think that's a great thing to do if you've got 20 quid that you can spend on it. It's the same sort of layout as the Year 1 book, but it's just got the pink-haired girl on the cover. So if you want to do that, I do advocate that. I will upload the textbook pages for the relevant Year 13 sections. It's really important that we get this bit finished out the way so that over summer you have time to A, do your summer homework, but B, we forget that research methods is 30% of your A-level. So you want to be refreshing yourself on those research methods, applying them to every question, every 16 marker. If you can pull out research methods, it's really easy AO3 marks. So I will upload the research methods workbook that I gave you to work through. If you still have a hard copy of that, which I really hope you all do, because you've done some really good work in there, this needs to be dug back out, because a lot of the stuff I'm going to ask you to do in this couple of lessons, 10-15 lessons, is going to be to go in that book to work through some questions. So dig that out, get that ready. I'll have an electronic version as well if you want to print out relevant pages, entirely up to you. But I really hope none of you have lost that, because it's got a lot of work in that you have done. So that's where we are. Year 13 section of research methods. I'll set you your summer homework, and then we come back to issues and debates, gender, schizophrenia, biopsychology, and forensics. We've got 5 modules to go. Hopefully we'll be finished by, my hope is mid-March next year, but we'll see. What with, having to self-teach yourself, a lot of the onus over summer is going to be catching yourself up, getting yourself into a position that you are confident to come back into Year 13. Otherwise, some serious conversations are going to be had based on, your eligibility to carry on the course. So a lot of stuff to get on with. So quick recap quiz. What I should say about this section is I think it's the hardest. The next 2-3 lessons are the hardest bits of research methods. Students struggle with this bit. It takes a lot of practice. I've got loads of questions for you to have a go at and a little work booklet for you to do for your homework. But this is where statistics is prominent, okay? This is a statistical element of research methods. So obviously it would be so much easier to be face-to-face and we could work through some examples. So if you are in school with me, you're lucky, because we're going to have a bit of face-to-face time where you can ask questions. If you are really stuck with this, do not hesitate to email me, and I can try my best to help you understand this element. So as ever, a quick recap quiz, 6 questions based on content so far. Pause this and test yourself. Where do you need to look over? Maybe it is, what are these 3 types of data? Can't remember anything about multi-storm model. And then these are the answers. So, when I say nominal interval ordinal data, what does that mean? So this is where we're coming all the way back to right at the end of research methods when we looked at primary and secondary data and different types of data. Now, these 3 are really important in the next section of this lesson. So when I say nominal data, I literally mean numerical, categorical data. So anything to do with numbers and anything to do, anything that can be put into a category. So something like age or gender, you cannot be 16 and 17. You're either one or the other. So that's nominal data. Ordinal data is anything that can be ranked or anything that can be ordered. So things like the age of students, we can rank that in an order from 11 to 18. And then interval data is anything on a scale. So I usually think of this like temperature or time, where you've got a set interval in between two numbers, for example. Okay, so like 5 past and 10 past, 5 minutes. So anything that can be put onto a scale. Now, these three are really important for this lesson. So what you need to do is to be able to choose what statistical test you are going to need given a set of data. So a statistical test is basically, we've done some research into coffee and concentration. We've got all our data, but we now need to know whether or not it's significant or not. So is there actually a relationship between how much coffee you consume and how well you do on a memory test? Or are those two things just coincidental? So this is where a statistical test would be needed. So we'd have to look at the type of data that we have. We'd need to look at if it's in independent groups or repeated measures. Then we look at the hypothesis, a whole variety of things which we'll talk through here, that we have to consider to then decide, okay, I'm going to choose this test to run my data to see if it's significant. Now, if any of you are choosing to do psychology at uni, which I think a few of you are, depending on what uni you go to, they have quite a heavy prominence on statistics. So I know, for example, in my first year, I had a 3-hour statistics exam on a computer where I basically had to choose a statistical test. And this is where A-levels are a little bit bonkers, because they've brought everything down from university level to you guys. So 2-3 years ago when the spec was different, you didn't have to do this. So this is something quite new that they've introduced, because it does set you up when you go to uni that you are going to have to look at statistics if you study psychology or geography or a variety, or sociology. It is something that is quite key in those areas. Okay, so it's basically, how am I going to decide if my results are significant? What test do I need to run through a computer to see if it is significant or not? Now, you don't have to. So when I upload the pages from the Year 2 textbook, there's loads of formulas in there. And, at university level, you will have to know those formulas and do it by hand. Whereas at your level, you don't have to actually physically, mathematically work out any test apart from the sign test, which we've already looked at. So the sign test is a statistical test, which we have done. And I would urge you to refresh yourself and check, practice that test, because that one you do have to do. But the rest, there's loads of different equations in there. You do not need to know. You just have to basically memorize this pink table, which we'll look at in a minute. So what you have to do when you're looking at a statistical, oh my God, I'm going to end up saying testicle. I know it, you know it. Statistical test. There's 3 questions that we have to decide and justify which test we're going to have to use. So we need to know the type of data. Is it nominal? Is it ordinal? Is it interval data? Is it a test of difference or a test of correlation? So is it an independent groups, a repeated measures, or is it correlational? And, match pairs falls under repeated measures. And then what design did they use? So those 3 things combined help us to decide which test we need. So these are the different tests. So all our tests are here. Sign test you definitely have to do. Chi-square, Mann-Whitney, Wilcoxon, Spearman, Pearson, related T and unrelated T are the statistical tests used to decide whether or not the results we need are prominent or useful. So those are the tests, and this is what they're used for. So you've only got 2 that are used for correlation, Spearman's or Pearson's. So if you had a little scenario that said something like looking at the relationship between coffee consumption and concentration, you would know that's a correlation. So instantly you're thinking, right, it's either Spearman's or Pearson's. Chi-square can be either difference or correlation, which we need to have a look at in a minute. And then the rest are a test of difference. So how I would do it is start by that. So start by, you're usually given a little scenario. So they won't make you work anything out. They'll give you a little spiel. You know, Tom and Claire went to do an experiment. This is who they tested it on, blah, blah, blah. From that little scenario that's written, you have to pick out, is it a test of difference? Is it a test of correlation? Okay, so you basically have to start with looking at, ruling out if it's a correlation and if it's a test of difference or not. Once you've done that, you can then move on to looking at the type of design. Now, you can do it in any order. It's totally up to you. So the type of design, you now have to think, okay, is it independent groups? You know, are there two separate groups? Is it repeated measures? Are they doing something more than once, like a memory test at 1 o'clock and 5 o'clock? Or is it matched pairs? Okay, all of that you've got to decipher from a little scenario, which we'll look at in a minute. And then once you have those two bits of information, you've then got to think about the level of data. Now, I have a little noise that helps students remember it, which is NOI, or NOI. You can say it any way you like. NOI, because that's the order it goes down in the table. Nominal, ordinal, or interval. So if it's ranking data, that's ordinal. If it's categorical, it's nominal. If it's scaled, it's interval. So I leave that one till last because hopefully the first two sections that we've worked through will help us to identify this a little bit better. So I have this on Show My Homework separate. You can print out and put up. So you basically for your exam have to learn this. And I have a little acronym to help you. Simon Cowell wants more singers receiving unanimous praise. Or there was another one, Swede. Oh, I can't remember. There's one in the textbook that you can use as well. So the easiest way to learn it is through the acronym, through NOI down the side, then related, unrelated, association. Now, a related design are your repeated measures and matched pairs, because you think of it in terms of they're doing it more than once, whereas unrelated, independent, unrelated, so that's your independent groups, and then correlation is association here. Okay, remember Spearman's and Pearson's are the only two correlations. So there's our types of measurement that we need to know, we've looked at already. So quick recap for you then to practice which level of measurement. Here are 6 little stems, scenarios. Pause this now and pick out which type of data these would produce. And then next slide's the answers. Don't cheat because you need to know this. You need to practice picking out types of data. I told you there's a lot of practice in this section. The more you practice, the better. So pause this and then come back. And then here are the answers. Now, there's always one, I can't remember which one, that students are like, well, I'm not sure how it's that and why it's this. Maybe it was. So 6 is obviously nominal, they're in one category or another. Reaction to aversive stimuli is interval, because we're using a heart rate monitor. So when it comes to data, I always try to say to students, think about the dependent variable. So what are they actually measuring? And that might help you dig out, because sometimes they are disguised as ordinal, but they might be interval. So the more practice that you have, the better. There's loads in that workbook that I gave you at the start of year 12 for research methods. There's some in a few other things I'll upload for you, but with the more practice, the better. Okay. So This is the big boy. This is what you need to remember. So in an exam, let's come back to that in a minute, actually. In an exam, they'll give you maybe something like this. They'll either give you a grid or they'll give you a little spiel, and you then have to work through these three things to pick out which type of test you'll need. So once you've worked through this, you then go back to your grid, and then you can say, right, okay, it's nominal data. I've worked that one out, and it's an unrelated design, therefore it has to be chi-square. So once you've worked through these, you come back to the data and then input it at the table, then input from there. I really hope this is making sense so far. So like I said, in the exam, you haven't got to actually carry out any of these tests. You just have to justify your choice of test. So you'll just have to say, so this is a test of difference. The level of measurement used is nominal. The type of design used is repeated measures or is independent groups. And then say, therefore, a chi-square would be used. One thing that you might see on the bottom of these, an interval, is parametric. If you're talking about interval data, then say that so if it's an interval data test, like let's go with unrelated t-test. So you'd say it's an interval data, bearing in mind or provided the parametric criteria are met. So that has to just be learned into anything that's interval data. And we'll look at parametric tests and why that is in a couple of lessons' time. They're basically the best test you can use. So I want you to practice. Which test would you use? So you've got 10 participants here. Either they're taking part, so you've got a new mathematics help scheme here and the scores they've got. Participants here 11 to 19 and with no scheme. So the independent variable is whether or not they were given the maths help scheme. And what they are measuring is their maths test score. So work through these three things. What type of data is it? Is it a test of difference? Which design would you need? Then go back to Simon Cowell wants more singers receiving unanimous praise. Input it. Remember, you've got NOI down the side, nominal, ordinal, interval. Related, unrelated, correlation. Where would that fit in? So pause this now, have a go at it. And then the answer is a Mann-Whitney. Why is it a Mann-Whitney, you might be screaming? Well, it's a Mann-Whitney because it's an unrelated design. You've got two sets of participants there. One of them are on the help scheme and one of them aren't. One of them isn't. So it's unrelated. It's ordinal data because what we're going to be able to do once we've got those 19 participants18 is order them. So we can say, right, well, participant 8 scored 7, whereas participant 18 scored 20. So we can rank that, order that, and then make a decision from there. Okay. Next. 10 participants. We've got study time in minutes and test score. Every time I do that, it always does that. I never remember. So weirdly, this one's a Spearman's row. Why is that a Spearman's row? Well, we'll go back. Look at what we need for a Spearman's row. Ordinal data again, because we're going to look at the test time. We're going to look at their scores, rank those scores, but it's a test of association, not a test of difference, because we're associating how long they took on it to how well they did, which kind of is shown in the results, isn't it? 95 minutes, 70% score. 80 minutes, 61% score. 10 minutes, 41. Okay, so there's a correlation between those two things. Next one. 10 participants. Whether the IV, whether the word presented is a neutral or emotionally threatening word. And the dependent variable is how many words they can recall once the time is up. Pause it. What do you think? It's a Wilcoxon. Again, we go back. Why is it a Wilcoxon? Ordinal data. So we are ranking how many words they can remember from the emotionally threatening and the neutral words. And it's a related design because it's repeated measures. So they are shown, because there's only 10 participants, they're shown the neutral words first and then the emotionally threatening. It would make it in independent groups if we had another set of 10. So that kind of gives it away. There's only 10, so they must have been shown one after the other. So this is really tricky because you have to really, really criticise it and think and try and work out what the examiner wants. It's not an easy thing to do. The more practice, the better, I do promise though. Next, extroverted and introverted. Art students, science students. Looking at whether art students or science students are introverted or extroverted. Measuring their extroversion introversion score. That's a chi-square. Now, a hint for deciphering whether or not it's a chi-square is if you can see a contingency table like this. So if you're presented with a table, most likely it's a chi-square. Obviously not in all cases, still work through the same procedure, data design difference. But if it looks like this with a column total here, it's most likely going to be a chi-square. So what I've attached on Show My Homework then is a worksheet for you to have a go at deciphering which test you're going to use and why you would use it. So what you're going to need to do is keep referring back to the Simon Cowell table to help you with that. Try and memorise it if you can, but if not, just keep referring back to it. The more practice, the better. Extension, there are some more exam style questions attached there for you to have a go at. And I have got all the answers, so you can test yourself if you want to. Pause this now and have a go. And then I think the only way we can do it is if there are any you're not sure of or that make no sense, drop me an email, send me a voice note or whatever, and I'll see if I can help decipher a little bit further. Okay, so these are the answers for the questions. Then you have the extra exam question answers there. Then a little summary. How confident do you feel? So that's an introduction into statistical test, deciding which ones you want and what you need. And then next lesson is basically practice. So if you're in school with me, we'll be doing that in a couple of weeks' time. But essentially, it's just looking at each of the individual tests in turn, working through a work booklet, and just practicing based on that test. Okay, any questions, any concerns, email me.